The knock on the door wasn't a knock. It was a statement, three sharp, concussive thuds that rattled the glass in the windows and seemed to vibrate straight through the bones in my chest. It was the kind of knock that didn't ask politely. It demanded. It told. And in that moment I knew whatever waited on the other side of that door wasn't going to be good. My eyes flew open, the red digits on the alarm clock glaring back at me. 5:32 a.m. too early for neighbors, too aggressive for deliveries. Dawn hadn't even touched the sky yet, just a faint gray line on the horizon. Beside me, Sarah stirred, the steady rhythm of her breathing breaking into something shallow, alert, listening. She was awake now. She felt it too. I was already moving, quiet, controlled. My body still remembered this feeling, the unwelcome intrusion of the outside world pressing in on a place meant to be safe. A language I hadn't spoken in years, but one you never really forget. My hand reached instinctively to the dresser, not for the flashlight resting there, but for the weight of it. Cold, heavy metal in my grip. A reminder, a balance in my hand. Mark, Sarah's whisper carried 1,000 questions in one word. I turned to her. She was sitting up, the faint light from the window drawing sharp edges across her face. Calm but tense, always calm, always strong. I gave her a small shake of my head, stay put, stay quiet. She nodded, but her thumb hovered over her phone, already ready for whatever was coming. That's who she was. Another thud came. Louder, sharper, more impatient this time, not a neighbor, not a mistake. This was deliberate. From downstairs, a faint shift in the floorboards reached my ears. The sound of someone else moving. That would be Dave and Leo, my old teammates, Navy SEALs, brothers. They were visiting for a week, a reunion of fishing trips and old war stories. But their instincts were still wired the same. That shuffle wasn't casual. They were awake, aware, and already calculating. Wrong house to test at dawn. I reached the stairs and flattened myself against the wall, my breath steady, my heartbeat slowing into something mechanical. Years of training wrapping around me like a second skin. I leaned toward the peephole and froze. Three men, all big, all in black polo shirts under black vests, and in bold yellow letters stamped across their chests, HOA Inspector. A bitter laugh almost rose in my throat. Inspectors. At 5:30 in the morning, no clipboard checklists or friendly door tags. They stood shoulder to shoulder, heavy like enforcers. One had a clipboard, but the way he carried himself wasn't administrative, it was predatory. The thick neck, the stance of someone used to pushing his way through. His flanking partners looked like hired muscle at a nightclub, arms crossed, standing at parade rest. Not inspectors, not neighbors, a threat. Behind me, Sarah appeared silently at the bottom of the stairs, her phone clutched tight, her face pale but composed. Trauma nurse for 15 years, she knew how to function when the world tilted sideways. I held up 3 fingers, pointed at their vests. Her eyebrows lifted, her lips mouthing the words HOA. At this hour, her disbelief mirrored my own, and that was the first red flag. When things don't make sense, you pay attention. Dave and Leo slid into view like shadows. Casual clothes couldn't hide the way they moved. Silent, calculated, a triangle forming behind me without a word spoken. Then came the voice, gravelly, hard. Mark Hale, we know you're in there. Open the door. HOA business. Sarah's thumb pressed her screen. A calm voice filled the hallway. 911, what is your emergency? Her words cut through the tension like a scalpel. My name is Sarah Hale. My address is 121 Arbor Lane. 3 men are on my porch attempting to force entry into my home. They're claiming to be from the Homeowners Association. It's 5:35 a.m. The leader's face soured at the sound of the dispatcher's voice. He shoved a paper toward the peephole. Work order, we need to see your son. My blood turned cold. Ethan, my son, 15 years old. Every instinct in me lit up like a flare. This wasn't about grass length or a garbage can left out overnight. This was about him. I slid the deadbolt with a deliberate click. The chain stayed latched, a thin barrier but still a line. I opened the door just enough for cool air to wash over my face. Their eyes met mine. Cold, demanding, clipboard guy pushed the paper closer. Reports of unauthorized equipment in the boys' room we need to inspect. My voice stayed steady. It's not going to happen. You're on private property. The police have been called. I suggest you leave. For a moment, no one moved, just my quiet voice against their heavy breathing. Behind me, Dave loomed like a wall. Leo stayed hidden, a shadow waiting. Sarah's 911 call carried on in the background. But Clipboard Guy wasn't subtle. He snarled, dropped his shoulder, and rammed the door. The chain groaned under the force. Wood splintered, but I was ready. My left hand shot through the gap, not to push back, but to catch, to trap, to control. My fingers clamped his wrist, bending him into his own momentum. His eyes went wide with shock, then pain. He tried to pull away, but my grip was iron. He wasn't getting in, not tonight. And for the first time, the truth was crystal clear. This wasn't about the HOA. This wasn't about bylaws. They were here for my son. And they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. How far will a man go to defend his own? The question thundered in my head as Clipboard Guy writhed against my grip, his arm bent at an angle nature never intended. His face flushed crimson, his jaw clenched, and still, he tried to fight the inevitable. He had expected a suburban dad in pajamas. He had found something else. "Let go of me," he hissed, his voice caught between pain and panic. I almost laughed. My voice stayed calm, steady, low enough to make him strain to hear. "No, you're not going anywhere until the deputies arrive. You just attempted to force entry into my home. That's breaking and entering. You might want to stay quiet." A gentle twist of his wrist, just a fraction more pressure, and he winced hard, his knees buckling. That joint only bent one way. Guess which? The other two stood frozen on the porch, their bravado leaking out of them with every second that passed. Their ringleader was pinned like a rag doll to my chained door. Their options were evaporating fast. Dave's deep voice rolled from behind me like distant thunder. "Bad math." The muscleheads blinked. "What?" "3 on 3, and you've already lost your best piece." His eyes narrowed, his massive frame filling the doorway behind me like a living wall. And then Leo stepped forward, not hulking like Dave, but sharp, lean, a coiled spring in human form. His gaze cut through them like a blade, cold, measured, unimpressed. He didn't have to say a word, the look in his eyes spoke volumes. The two thugs shifted uneasily, the confidence draining out of their postures. They weren't built for real resistance. They were bullies who thrived on fear, but right now they were the ones being hunted. And then far off in the distance, a siren, faint but growing. The sound was everything. To me it was relief, to them it was doom. Clipboard Guy's eyes widened as the wail grew louder. He thrashed against my grip, desperation replacing arrogance. "Let me go, now." "You wanted HOA business?" I said, my voice flat. "You'll be doing plenty of business with the sheriff." The chain on the door, stressed to its breaking point, finally snapped with a sharp crack. Clipboard Guy stumbled backward, crashing into his two cronies in a tangle of limbs. They collapsed into each other like clowns in a slapstick routine. And then they broke. All three scrambled off my porch, tripping over each other, sprinting for the black van idling across the street. The driver, hidden until now, slammed his foot on the gas before the side door even slid shut. Tires squealed. Rubber burned. The van fishtailed across the asphalt, panic painted across its every movement. And that's when karma caught up. The van's rear corner clipped my steel mailbox, cemented deep into the ground. Metal screeched. My mailbox tore free, spinning into the street. A small thing, a dent in steel, but it left something bigger, evidence. As the van lurched away, blowing through the stop sign, something white fluttered to the welcome mat. A rectangle, paper, left behind in their rush. I pointed, "Don't touch it." Sarah's voice, steady as ever, still filled the hall as she relayed details to the 911 dispatcher. 3 men fled in a black cargo van, no windows, headed eastbound. They left behind a document. We'll preserve it for deputies. Dave leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, watching the disappearing taillights. "They're sloppy, that's good." Leo crouched low, his sharp eyes scanning the paper on the mat. His lip curled into a humorless smile. "They wanted Ethan, they'll regret that." And upstairs, a faint creak. My son's door opening, his young voice trembling but steady enough to cut through the chaos. "Dad, what's happening?" I turned, my heart splitting in two. I wanted to tell him it was nothing, that it was just noise. But the truth sat heavy in my chest, undeniable. This wasn't about bylaws. This wasn't about grass length or garbage cans. They wanted my son. And now I wanted answers. Blue lights flared outside as deputies pulled up, their strobes painting the street in red and blue. The sirens died, but the air buzzed with authority, with official presence. Two officers stepped out, one older, seasoned, eyes sharp, one younger, eager, already snapping on gloves. Their body cams blinked green. Everything would be documented. "Possible home invasion?" the sergeant asked, scanning the shattered chain, the tire tracks, the mangled mailbox. His eyes fell to the paper on the mat. I nodded once. "They left us something." The sergeant crouched, gloved hands lifting the sheet. He read it, his brow tightening. Then he looked at me, voice low, even. "Work order HOA logo, signed by Karen Lawson." And just like that, everything clicked. Karen, of course, it always came back to her. But this time, it wasn't fines or warnings. This time, she had crossed a line she could never return from. And I knew this was only the beginning. Why would they want my son? The question burned through my chest like acid. Standing in the doorway with the deputies, the broken chain dangling at my side, I could feel the storm shifting. This wasn't random. This wasn't about control over lawns or mailbox paint. They had a target, and his name was Ethan. The older deputy, Miller, his badge Reed, fixed me with a steady look. His voice carried no judgment, just clarity. "Sir, why would your HOA president send a squad of men to your house with a fake work order targeting your boy's room? What would they expect to find?" Behind me, Sarah inhaled sharply. Her eyes cut to mine. We both knew the answer was waiting upstairs. "I think my son might have something they want," I said carefully. Miller nodded once as if he'd expected the words. He turned to his partner, a younger officer already photographing the tire tracks and shattered mailbox. "Secure the scene," Miller instructed. "Let's talk to the kid." I climbed the stairs slowly, my footsteps heavy. At Ethan's door, I knocked gently. "It's Dad, you awake?" The door cracked open and his face appeared, wide-eyed, pale, trembling just enough to betray the fear he was trying so hard to hide. My son. 15 years old, lanky and restless, caught between childhood and the edge of manhood. "I heard yelling," he whispered. "And the van, I saw it from my window." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. His room was the usual chaos of a teenager, clothes on the floor, posters peeling at the corners, headphones tangled on the desk. But one thing stood out. In the corner, perched on a shelf above his computer setup, was his drone. A sleek, powerful DJI Mavic 3. His pride, his project, his obsession. I pointed to it. "Ethan, buddy, did you record something recently, something you weren't supposed to see?" He froze, his eyes darted to the drone, then to his computer. A flicker of guilt crossed his face. "Just some practice flights," he stammered. "Down by the old quarry, I wasn't spying Dad, I swear." My heart clenched. I put a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "I'm not mad, I need the truth. Did you catch something? Something important?" He hesitated, then slowly he nodded. "I think so," he whispered. His fingers flew across the keyboard, opening folders marked with dates. 2 days ago, I was filming tracking shots over the quarry. Then this van showed up. It was weird, nobody ever goes there. He clicked a file. The screen lit up with crystal-clear footage from above. The drone's camera swept across the quarry road. Then, there it was. A black cargo van pulling into frame, identical to the one that had screeched away from our house just minutes earlier. I leaned in, my chest tightening. "Play it." The footage zoomed. 2 men climbed out, the driver staying behind the wheel. They opened the back doors. Heavy-duty containers, industrial grade, slid into view. And then, without hesitation, they tipped them into the quarry's water pit. A dark, viscous liquid poured out, staining the surface with toxic swirls. My stomach dropped. Illegal dumping, not just garbage, something chemical, something dangerous. Ethan's voice was low, guilty. I knew it was wrong. That's why I flew lower, tried to stay hidden. The camera angle shifted, dipping beneath the tree line. From the side, through branches, a man turned back toward the van. His face caught the light. I stopped breathing. It was him, clipboard guy, the same man who had been pinned against my door less than an hour ago. The footage sharpened further, and the van's rear license plate came into perfect, undistorted focus. Clear, readable, undeniable. Ethan looked at me, his fear shifting into something else. Understanding. They wanted this, didn't they? I squeezed his shoulder, my voice breaking just slightly. Yeah, they weren't here for you, Ethan. They were here for what you caught on camera. And as the footage froze on clipboard guy face, every piece slid into place. Karen Lawson hadn't just sent thugs to my porch. She had sent them to erase evidence, to silence the truth, to protect something far bigger than HOA rules. Because my son, my 15-year-old son, had stumbled into a crime that could bring her entire empire crashing down. And that meant only one thing. She wasn't going to stop. They won't stop, will they? Sarah's voice was steady, but I could see the fear tucked beneath it. She stood in the kitchen under the dim glow of a single lamp, arms crossed, phone still in her hand. She already knew the answer before I spoke. No, I said. Not when the video ties them to a felony. They're desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. That truth was burned into me from years overseas. Different uniforms, different flags, same behavior. Corner a rat and it bares its teeth. Karen Lawson was no different. We didn't waste time. Ethan sat at his desk, fingers flying across the keyboard. He copied the footage to multiple flash drives, encrypted the original file, and uploaded a backup to a cloud account with two-factor authentication. Layer after layer of protection. Even if they get this computer, he said, his voice calmer now, they get nothing. I felt pride swell in my chest. My son, 15 years old and already handling this like a professional, I knelt beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. You did everything right, Ethan. You saw something wrong and documented it. That takes guts. He nodded, though his eyes still carried the weight of what he'd seen. Meanwhile, Sarah was moving with her own precision, photographing the damage to the doorframe, documenting the tire tracks, measuring them against the street with a nurse's precision. She was turning chaos into evidence, every detail logged like a patient's chart. She was more than my wife. She was my partner. And Dave and Leo, they were already turning the house into a fortress. Floodlights checked. Motion sensors live, Leo said, testing the backyard perimeter. His wiry frame moved through the shadows like he belonged there. Dave's deep voice rumbled from the living room. Front angles covered, blind spots noted. If they come back, we'll see them before they see us. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Not relax, never that, but breathe. The house was secure. My son was safe. The evidence was protected. But safety is an illusion, and peace when you're being hunted is just the pause before the storm. It came just after midnight. The night outside was quiet, a blanket of crickets and distant traffic. I sat in the darkened living room, watching the street through the blinds. That's when I heard it. A faint hum, high-pitched, mechanical. I froze, my breath caught. Not Ethan's drone. I knew that sound too well. This was different, smaller, faster, sharper, a machine built for spying. A black shape hovered above the backyard, its red and green lights blinking like malevolent fireflies. A spy drone. As I watched, a small object detached from its belly, tumbling down into the grass. It landed with a soft thud. Then it came alive. Bright strobing lights exploded against the night. Blue, white, blinding. A shrill screech pierced the air, high frequency, designed to disorient. Sparks burst from the sides, spitting like fireworks. It looked dangerous, like it might explode. Sarah gasped from the hallway. Mark. Stay back, I ordered, my voice calm, controlled. I knew what this was, a scare tactic, an amateur's toy meant to panic us into running outside. Not tonight. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the sink and slipped through the garage, circling around the side of the house, keeping to the shadows. The box screeched and sparked in the middle of the lawn, trying to sell the illusion of chaos. I didn't buy it. A sharp blast from the extinguisher. White powder enveloped the box, smothering its sparks, muffling its scream. Within seconds, it sputtered out, dead. Threat neutralized. But I wasn't celebrating. Because I knew the box wasn't the real play, it was the distraction. And then I saw him. A dark figure clad in black halfway over the backyard fence. One leg over, one hand gripping the post. Waiting for us to rush outside, blinded and panicked. But we hadn't panicked. He froze when he realized the plan had failed. One leg still dangling over the fence, caught in hesitation. That was all I needed. I lifted my phone to my lips. Sergeant Miller was already on the line. My voice was a whisper. He's on the back fence, east side, black hoodie, about to run. And then the figure dropped back outside the fence. Feet hit the ground. He bolted down the alley behind the houses, fast, but not fast enough. Because this time, we were ready. The runner thought he was free. I watched from the shadows as he sprinted down the alley, his dark hoodie melting into the night. Fast, yes, but speed isn't freedom. Not when every move he made was already being tracked. He's headed south on the alley, Chestnut Avenue exit, I murmured into my phone. Sergeant Miller's voice snapped back instantly, sharp and controlled. Unit 2, position south end, subject in dark clothing on foot heading your way. The night stayed quiet, except for the sound of footsteps slapping against asphalt. Then silence. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. We got him, Miller said. His voice carried the satisfaction of a trap sprung clean. 2 blocks away, winded trying to play casual, had a pry bar, lockpicks, and a phone buzzing nonstop. Caller ID says boss. He's asking for a lawyer. I exhaled slowly. Another piece of their puzzle caught and caged. But it wasn't victory, not yet, because every move they made was louder, sloppier, and desperation always escalates. When morning broke, the storm wasn't gone. It was waiting. Miller called early, his voice heavy but energized. That phone he had? Gold mine. Non-stop texts with one number all night. We're working the warrant now, but I'd bet my pension it ties back to your HOA office. Of course it would. Karen Lawson's fingerprints were all over this. But the law moved slowly. Warrants, subpoenas, hearings, and in the meantime, my family was still the target. Especially Ethan. The thought gnawed at me. Where was he most vulnerable? Not at home, Dave, Leo, and I could hold the line here. No, vulnerability came when he stepped outside our walls. School. The transition between classrooms, the chaos of dismissal, the brief walk to my car. A window of exposure, a crowd where predators could hide. I sat him down that morning, looking him square in the eye. He was pale, exhausted, but listening. Today is going to be different, I told him. They failed twice here. That means they'll try again, probably at school. Fear flickered across his face, but he didn't flinch. He straightened his back, his mother's resilience shining through. What do we do? It was we, not you, not me. We. He was part of this fight now. You do what you always do, I said softly. You go to class, you talk to your friends, but when the final bell rings, you don't head for the pickup zone. You go straight to the principal's office. You wait for me there, no detours, no exceptions, understand? He nodded firm, and you? I'll be there, I said, but they won't see me. By mid-morning, the plan was in motion. My first call was to Principal Albright. Calm, precise. I gave her the facts. The police reports the attempted home invasion, the ongoing investigation. She didn't panic. She listened. She agreed. My second call was to Sergeant Miller. Together, we built the trap. It was simple, classic, a sting operation in a high school parking lot. The bait, a decoy. Leo stepped forward without hesitation. He was my height, my build. With a hoodie and a cap pulled low, he could pass for me from a distance. More importantly, he knew how to handle himself. The school resource officer, Grant, a sharp ex-Marine, was looped in. He'd be the takedown man. He knew every inch of that school's grounds better than anyone. And Sarah, she insisted on being there, watching, documenting, another set of eyes in the crowd, my partner always. By 2:45 p.m., I was parked 200 yards from the main entrance, binoculars steady in my hands. Leo leaned casually against my car in his disguise, scrolling through his phone like any bored parent. Sarah's vehicle waited on the far side of the lot. The bell rang, the doors opened. Chaos spilled out, kids laughing, shouting, backpacks bouncing, a tide of noise and life, and somewhere in that tide, a predator was hunting. My eyes swept the lot, not for a van this time. They weren't that stupid. I was searching for something out of place, someone scanning too hard. And then I saw him. A man in a blue jacket by the bike racks. He wasn't looking at kids, he was searching, waiting, his eyes locked on Leo. He touched his ear, a hidden mic, he got his signal. And just like that, he started moving. Crowds hide monsters. That was the first thought slicing through my mind as I watched the man in the blue jacket push through the sea of students. He didn't see kids, he didn't see teachers, he saw prey. And right now, he thought the prey was my son. Leo stood cool by the car, his cap low, his posture casual. He scrolled on his phone like a bored teenager's dad, but his eyes, hidden beneath the brim, were sharp, tracking every move. The man closed in. 10 yards, 8, 5. His hand slipped inside his jacket, fingers wrapping around something metallic. Not a weapon to kill, too public, something quieter, something for control. A syringe. My stomach turned to ice. Grant, I whispered into the comm. The school resource officer was already moving, shadowing the crowd with the precision of a man who'd fought battles before. His plain polo shirt made him invisible, but the stance, the readiness, it screamed Marine. The man lunged. His hand shot out, aiming for Leo's arm, syringe flashing in the sunlight. But Leo wasn't a teenager, he was a SEAL. In a blur, he pivoted, trapping the man's wrist in a bone-crushing lock. The syringe clattered to the pavement, rolling under a student's sneaker. Gasps erupted from the crowd as Leo twisted, forcing the man down. And then Grant was there. His knee drove into the suspect's back, his cuffs flashing. Police, stay down. The crowd froze. Students clutched their backpacks tighter. Teachers rushed to pull kids back. A circle formed, phones shooting videos, every angle capturing the takedown in brutal clarity. The man on the ground writhed, shouting curses, but Grant's weight kept him pinned. His face hit the asphalt, cheeks scraping raw. His jacket ripped open, revealing wires, a small mic taped to his collar. And then, like a nail driven into the coffin, Grant yanked a wallet from the man's pocket. He flipped it open, held up the ID card. The name shouted from his lips like a hammer blow. Lawson Security Services. The crowd erupted. Whispers turned into gasps, phones zoomed in. Everyone knew the name, Lawson. Karen Lawson. It was no longer rumor, no longer suspicion. Her fingerprints were carved into this mess for all to see. I could see Ethan through the glass of the principal's office window, his face pale but eyes locked on the chaos outside. He knew. We all knew. This wasn't about fines or dues anymore. This was crime. Organized, deliberate, dangerous crime. Miller's unmarked cruiser slid into the lot, lights flashing. He stepped out calm, commanding, as if the chaos bowed to his presence. His voice carried across the parking lot. Secure the suspect. Bag the syringe, collect every witness statement, and get those videos before they hit TikTok. But he knew it was too late for that. This wasn't a secret anymore. The story had escaped into the wild. Leo released his grip and straightened, brushing dust from his hands. His eyes cut across the lot, meeting mine from 200 yards away. His slight nod said it all. We've got him. But my gut didn't settle. Because if they were desperate enough to try this in broad daylight in front of teachers and children, then they were out of moves. And people out of moves, they're the most dangerous of all. Sarah pulled up beside me, her voice sharp with urgency. This isn't going to stop, Mark. Not until Karen herself is cornered, you know that. I nodded, my jaw tightened. She was right. The deputy shoved the suspect into the back of the cruiser. Miller turned, scanning the crowd, his voice low but carrying. This isn't just HOA overreach. This is criminal conspiracy, fraud, assault, attempted kidnapping. We're moving fast on this one. The crowd buzzed louder. Students whispered, parents recorded. The Lawson name was no longer a shadow, it was in the spotlight, burned into the public record. But as Miller locked eyes with me, I could see it, the warning. This wasn't victory, not yet. Because when you shine a light on darkness, it doesn't vanish. It fights back. Sometimes the scariest monsters don't hide in shadows. They walk right up your driveway in broad daylight. That's exactly what Karen Lawson did. It was 2 days after the school sting, and the air in our neighborhood carried a strange tension. Parents whispered in driveways. Teenagers replayed the video of the takedown like it was the latest viral clip. The Lawson name was everywhere, her reputation bleeding out like an open wound. But Karen, she didn't flinch. Her red Lexus rolled to a stop in front of our house that afternoon, its engine purring like a predator at rest. The door opened, and out she stepped, immaculate as ever. Red blazer, white blouse, gold necklace catching the sunlight. Her heels clicked against the pavement with a rhythm that screamed confidence. No shame, no fear. She marched straight up my walk, ignoring the stares of half the neighborhood. People watched from windows, curtains twitching, cameras angled from porches. Karen thrived on it. I opened the door before she could knock. No chain this time, just me. Her smile was thin, predatory. "Mr. Hale, we need to talk." Behind me, Dave loomed in the hallway, his arms crossed, a silent wall of muscle. Leo stood further back, still and unreadable. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, phone already recording. Karen noticed all of it. She didn't care. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. "Say it here." Her eyes gleamed. "You think you've won something, a thug in handcuffs, a few deputies sniffing around, but you don't understand, do you? You're standing in the way of something bigger than you, bigger than your family, bigger than this entire neighborhood." Her voice was smooth, almost rehearsed. Every syllable carried weight, like she delivered it before in boardrooms and secret meetings. I said nothing. Silence was more powerful than words. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her tone dropping. "That boy of yours, he doesn't know what he's holding. You think you've protected him with backup drives and cloud accounts? Cute. But data is fragile. Families are fragile. All it takes is one accident." Her meaning was razor clear. My jaw tightened. "If you threaten my son again, you won't like where this ends." She smirked. You're just a washed-up soldier clinging to the glory days. You don't make the rules here, I do." Her arrogance was suffocating, but beneath it I caught a flicker, desperation. The cracks were showing. I let the silence stretch, then finally said, "You've already lost. The whole town saw your man in cuffs. They know your name now." For the first time, her smirk faltered, just slightly, but she recovered fast, snapping her sunglasses back over her eyes. "You'll regret this," she spat. Then she turned sharply, heels clicking against the pavement as she strode back to her Lexus. The door slammed, the engine roared, and she was gone. I stood on the porch, watching her taillights vanish. My fists clenched, my pulse steady. Dave joined me, his voice a low rumble. "She's cornered, that makes her dangerous." Leo nodded once. "She'll strike soon, and it won't be subtle." Back inside, Sarah replayed her recording, Karen's threats crystal clear. "She practically confessed," Sarah said quietly, "but it won't stop her. She's too deep in whatever this is." I sank into the chair across from her, rubbing my temples. The seals were right. The fight wasn't over. It was building toward something final. Ethan came down the stairs, his eyes searching mine. "Dad, are we safe?" I looked at him, my son, my responsibility, my reason. "No," I admitted softly. "Not yet, but we will be." Dave leaned forward, his massive hands clasped. "Then it's time we stop reacting and start planning." Leo spread a map of the neighborhood across the table, his finger tracing the streets, the alleys, the blind spots. "She's local. Her power comes from fear here. That means her next move will be here, on her turf. We prepare for that." The kitchen filled with quiet intensity, the kind that comes before a storm. And in that moment I knew, this wasn't about an HOA anymore. It wasn't about bylaws or dues. It was a battle. And Karen Lawson had just declared war. Night has a way of magnifying fear. The quiet, the shadows, the feeling that something is about to break, and that night it broke. At 2 a.m., motion sensors lit the backyard like a stage. Dave's voice growled from the living room, low but urgent. Movement, south fence. I was already on my feet, boots on, jacket zipped, my pulse steady, controlled. Leo was by the window, his eyes narrowing. 3, no, 4 figures, moving fast, all black clothing, same as before. Ethan stirred on the couch, half asleep, his voice groggy. Dad. Stay down, I whispered. No matter what happens, you stay here with Mom. Sarah's hand found his, her grip steady. She was afraid, yes, but her courage never faltered. The crash came a second later, back fence splintering, shadows pouring in. 4 men, armed with batons and tasers, moving with the confidence of predators who thought they owned the night. But they didn't own this ground, not tonight. Leo moved first. Silent as a ghost, he slipped out the side door and vanished into the dark. Dave rose behind me, his massive frame filling the hall, every muscle tensed for impact. I stepped onto the porch, the cool air biting my skin. My voice cut across the yard, sharp, deliberate. This is your last chance, leave now. They didn't leave, they charged. The first thug swung wide with a baton, but Dave intercepted, his forearm catching the strike with a bone-shaking thud. His other hand closed around the man's throat, lifting him clean off the ground before slamming him flat into the dirt. Another rushed me, taser crackling. I ducked, twisted my hand, snapping his wrist sideways until the weapon clattered to the grass. My elbow caught his jaw, sending him sprawling. Leo emerged from the dark like a blade. His kick swept the legs from the third intruder, dropping him hard. Before the man could rise, zip ties clicked tight around his wrists. 3 down, 1 left. The last man froze. His weapon hung limp in his hand. His courage shattered when he saw his team broken in seconds. He dropped everything and bolted for the fence. But blue lights were already cutting across the street. Sirens rising, deputies pouring in. The runner never made it. Within minutes, the yard was swarming with uniforms. Deputies cuffed the intruders, read rights, bagged evidence. Miller strode up the walkway, his face grim but satisfied. This is it. This is the nail. And then headlights. A red Lexus rolled up slow, deliberate like it belonged. Karen Lawson stepped out, her heels sinking slightly into the grass. She didn't look panicked. She looked furious. Her voice carried sharp and venomous. You can't do this. Those are private contractors authorized by the HOA board. You'll regret touching them. Miller didn't flinch. He held up a folder fat with papers. Actually, Karen, we have warrants, phone records, bank transfers, security contracts tied directly to you. And tonight, these men crossed onto private property with weapons. That's not HOA business. That's organized crime. For the first time, Karen's face cracked. Her confidence wavered. Neighbors emerged from their houses, phones raised, recording every second. She was no longer the queen of this street. She was the villain under floodlights. She tried to step back, but deputies were already there. The cuffs clicked around her wrists. Her voice rose, desperate now, shrieking at the cameras. You'll all regret this. I built this neighborhood. You're nothing without me. But her words fell flat. The empire she'd built on fear was crumbling in real time. The people she ruled with fines and threats were watching her dragged into the back of a cruiser. Ethan stepped onto the porch beside me, his eyes wide but steady. Dad, is it over? I looked at him, my son who had accidentally uncovered the truth, and for the first time in days, I let myself breathe. Yeah, son, it's over. The red and blue lights painted the night as Karen's Lexus was towed, her empire dismantled piece by piece. Dave and Leo stood silently beside me, guardians of a home that would never be the same. Sarah squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with relief. And in the quiet that followed, I felt it, justice. Sometimes it comes fast, sometimes it takes years, but it always comes. Karen thought she could use power to crush us. She thought fear was stronger than truth. But she was wrong. Because the strongest families, they don't fight alone. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.